Hey now, and welcome to episode 45 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here all along, welcome back. But if this is your first time listening to us, well, welcome. I'm your host, Ruben, and as always, Stan is on the line. How you doing, man?
Doing great, buddy.
So yeah, this episode, this was Joel, and he reached out to you through Reddit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we posted, actually it was a Thank You Plant Medicine video to the Ayahuasca subreddit, and he happened to message me.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you were telling me the story, I was like, okay, yeah, that's definitely worthy of a podcast episode. Not like we're picky or anything, but after having this discussion, it's like, holy shit, like not only am I glad that he's telling his story to anyone, I felt kind of lucky he was telling it to us, right?
Yeah, no, that's spot on, man. It's crazy how people can come out of nowhere and, share something like that. Like we don't even post on Reddit that often anymore. And the one video that I did in probably the past 4 months gets us a gem like that, man. And it was definitely an honor to hear his story for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, it just goes to show that, it just takes one person reaching out to really have, a conversation and a story just kind of frozen in time like that. And it's what keeps us doing this podcast and posting stuff on Reddit and YouTube and whatever, it's like, it just takes one person to reach out to really have a connection that is pretty awesome. So yeah, without any more discussion about it, here's Joel.
Yeah, Joel. So I just wanted to have you on because, the story that you were mentioning to me and you reached out via Reddit was super compelling and took me away to, this awesome world where it all kind of was crazy and then came into this beautiful world of psychedelics and a lot of solution and cures. So I'd love to go through your life just in chronological order if you're okay with doing that.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. And I'd love to really explore just how dark it was, because the things that happened to me led me to a place of deep, deep hopelessness. I wallowed in hopelessness. I had no concept that I could be happy. I believed the greatest gift I could give my children was my death. I mean, dark. And for people who are listening who are in a dark place, I really want to give them a sense of it can be this bad and then it can be this good. You can be happy. The medicine literally transformed my life. I guess the best place to start is when I was 8 years old, because at the age of 8, my life was normal. I'm here in Australia and I'm living a normal childhood, no issues, good family. And at the age of 8, my parents decided that we were going to move from Australia to a place called Mindanao, which is the sort of main bottom island in the Philippines. And it was cowboy town. A lot of really, really intense things happened. So, for example, my dad worked in mountains with tribal groups such as the Manapamatigsalog, the Araya, the Subanon, different tribal groups. So he would go away for 8 months of the year, just go into the mountains. But in these areas where he worked, there was communist rebel activity. The NPA, or the New People's Army, had been fighting a long-standing war against the government for communist control of the country. On the other side of the island, it was Muslim extremist groups such as the Moro Liberation Front, the MNLIF, MNLF, the MILF, Abu Sayyaf. These are the guys who are kidnapping people and beheading people and all this kind of stuff. So very extreme, very militant, connected to Al Qaeda, all this kind of stuff. And that's where he would go. So he was on the radar by the military in the region as being a potential terrorist trainer working with the communist groups in particular. And then he was in the bad books with all of the rebels and insurgents because they believed that he was linked to the CIA. So whenever he went into the mountains, he was in a very dangerous environment. So he got captured twice in the mountains. One time by the military, one time by the rebels. Both times his life was at risk. People that he was with, they executed. He was spared through some sort of miracle, fear of reprisal, I guess, for an international assassination, perhaps. But as a young boy, I had this incredible sense of danger. Dad got taken twice. We had the communist group. Well, they had my dad captive. They attacked our house, and they captured my mum. And they used her as a human shield. They stripped her naked. They dragged her through the streets, and they used her as a human shield in a gun battle. At the age of 10, I discovered and explored the inside of a mass grave. At the time, I didn't understand that was a traumatic thing to do. I didn't mean to fall into the mass grave. I was in it. It was on top of all the bodies and things. At the age of 12, I was walking down the street, and three men jumped me with a knife and tried to stab me to death. I've got a number of friends who've been shot, blown up, kidnapped, that kind of thing. Well, my parents' friends, I was young. We had a guy with a shotgun who would guard our house at night. So our walls were these big 10-foot concrete walls, barbed wire fence on the top, broken glass on the top, metal spikes, big metal gate, and a security guard with a shotgun. He'd shoot at people if they tried coming over the fence at night. And the communist rebels overthrew the town when we were living in it. And if we went outside, we would have been executed. So you had to sort of bunker down. So really, really wild stuff. At 16, people pulled a gun on me and tried to shoot me, all that kind of stuff. The more, on top of that, the real damage came from I didn't fit in. So at a really deep level, if I left the house, people would just yell abuse at me. Go home. We don't want you here. Go back to your country. Go back home, which is understandable. But all of that gave me this really, really deep sense of not fitting in, not belonging. And to my core, I felt I wasn't Australian. I wasn't Filipino. I went to a school with American kids, but I wasn't American. I didn't have any connections. I was very sort of disrupted in my life and felt like I was sort of floating around and didn't belong anywhere. When I returned back to Australia, the reception was not kind. I was a weird kid from a weird place and I didn't fit in. And so I was really ostracized when I came back here. So these feelings of not belonging as a child carried on into my adulthood. And I didn't belong anywhere. Everywhere I went, they're like, you're strange, you don't fit in, don't hang out with us. People really quite aggressively. I was manifesting it, I think, looking back on it now. I was coming from a dark place and I was bringing about darkness in my present moments. I finally found some peace when I joined the army because they break you down and they build you back up. And all of a sudden, I belonged. I had a place where I fit in and I thrived. I was an army officer. I did an Iraq deployment. I wasn't a warfighter. I was in logistics, so my deployment wasn't particularly dangerous. But I really succeeded and I really belonged, and it was really important to me. It became my identity. Until one night, after a inter-unit function, it was really time to go home. Everyone was drunk, and three members from another unit attacked me, and they forced me into a small animal cage, and they sexually assaulted me with a stick. They filmed the entire incident. They mocked me, humiliated me, degraded me, and this really broke me. It wasn't just the incident, but all of a sudden, Army covered it up, and all of a sudden I didn't belong. The one place where I'd put down roots and I really belonged, I didn't belong, and I completely imploded. All that trauma from my youth, all those dark experiences, all that feeling of threat and danger. All of a sudden, I've been attacked, and I couldn't prevent it from happening, and sexually abused, and it set me off the deep end. Clinically, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, major depressive disorder with anxiety, and I became a meth addict, a junkie, so addiction. I was shooting up lots of drugs. My marriage ended, just as this all sort of happened. And I got caught up in a really, really damaging loop, and I became so full of disgust for myself and so damaged that I even went to the lengths where I would sell my body to men for drugs or for small amounts of cash. That's a really important point because it's I'm not gay, I'm not bi, I'm a straight man, but I had such low regard for my body and for myself and who I was and for my spirit that I allowed people to do whatever they wanted to me. And all of the trauma from my youth was now being manifested in my present, and I was traumatizing myself. I became my own traumatizer, and multiple stints in mental health facilities, not where I was voluntary, but where I was detained, suicide attempts, and I had no hope. I'd completely given up on the idea of ever being any version of happy. I managed to find a wonderful woman who had empathy for my situation, and when I wasn't high, she really liked me, and she lived a very clean lifestyle. And basically, she said, "If we're ever going to have any sort of future, you have to be completely better." But psychology, psychiatry, rehab, medication, none of it worked. I now realize I was clinging to that self-identity of pain, and I didn't know how to let it go. So, in desperation, I decided to go to the Amazon, a place called Blue Morpho, one of many world-class ayahuasca retreats, and to drink there in Peru. It was 5 ceremonies over 6 nights, and on night 2, I had total and complete healing. Complete. Night 1 set up the healing, and night 2 was I don't even have words for it. And I would love to go into some detail about what I mean by that as we go through the podcast, but I won't bog down on that for the moment. On returning to Australia, my life was just completely in ruins, and ayahuasca had changed me so much that when people sort of lashed out at me and said, "You did this because of that, you've ruined my life," all this kind of really intense negativity, and I just felt a sense of calm and peace and empathy. I was able to support them as they sort of processed all of that. And now I'm in a space of just abundant joy and happiness, and literally every single aspect of my life is completely transformed. I'm off all medication. I'm allowed to work again because I wasn't allowed to work in my previous state. And there's no part of my life that hasn't changed.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
heavy, right?
incredible, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
It is incredible.
And I'm so
So
grateful.
yeah. How did you get to the point that you considered ayahuasca?
Um, Shout out to Joe Rogan. And this is one of the reasons why I'm putting myself out there in such a raw kind of way now. The only reason why I even heard of Joe Rogan, of ayahuasca, was from Joe Rogan mentioning it on his show. And then I heard it mentioned on London Real, where Dorian Yates, a former bodybuilding champion, talked about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I Googled it, and I saw a documentary on YouTube called Metamorphosis, which is a documentary about Blue Morpho, where I ultimately went. This had me curious, but years passed by before I got to this point where, in desperation, I just knew nothing, didn't know what else to do. But it was only through the courage of celebrities speaking out. And it goes to a point I mentioned briefly before the show. Before I went to Peru, I went to see my doctor to explain I was going off my medication, which is part of the medical clearing process. And he asked me why I'm going off meds, and I said I'm going to a healing retreat. He asked what the healing was. I explained it was ayahuasca. He didn't know what that was and asked me to describe it. And I explained it, and he looks at me right in the eyes and he says, "I have no problem with that," which I couldn't believe. I'm like, "What, really?" And he then went on to say that it sounds like psilocybin mushrooms, and he's read a number of incredibly impressive empirical studies that demonstrate the effectiveness of psychedelics in the treatment of mental health conditions. And so I've got his full support. But as a doctor, he can't even speak about it. And I thought, well, if he can't, it's up to people like Help Find the Others and myself to say, hey guys, this is here, this exists.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're a perfect example of that too. Just from the difference you said that your life, the difference in your life after coming back. So like I'm pretty ignorant to how the Australian culture is towards psychedelics, like other than the podcasts and the kind of like international media that helped you kind of steer you towards psychedelics as therapy. Um, is that a really underground thing, more than in other countries in Australia?
It's a little bit difficult to gauge because I don't know the experience in other countries, but my perception is it's probably more underground than what you have in America. So, for example, I know facilitators here, they only use encrypted emails, and they say that they're hosting a well-being retreat, and you're not paying money for ayahuasca, for example. You're paying for counseling and a retreat, and there happens to be ayahuasca there, which is a legal thing that they think gives them some protection. But it's classified as a Class A drug. So it's, according to the government, it's the same as taking heroin or crack.
Yeah.
But I do know one facilitator who opens completely transparently in the open, and he's never been contacted or spoken to. So I guess from a police enforcement point of view, they've got bigger problems to worry about, and it's way off the radar.
Mhm.
But to an extent, you're hoping that they turn a blind eye.
Is there, because in the United States there's several ayahuasca retreats, or shamans and stuff like that are able to do it out in the open as because of religious freedom, that they've jumped through those hoops. Is there that kind of thing in Australia that
No, not at
people
all.
can do, or no?
No, in fact, unlike America, we don't have a Bill of Rights, so we don't have the right to remain silent. We don't have, the religious freedoms rights. We've got laws that are in place to allow those kinds of things, but there's no sort of part of the situation in America is you've got Native Americans who have a tradition of using things like peyote and plant medicines in their tradition. So I guess it, to an extent, pried that door open, but we don't have a that sort of historical use in Australia. So as far as the government's concerned, it's foreign use. It's getting high in the jungle, and they really don't have any sort of space for it under law.
Yeah. So like the Aboriginal culture doesn't have a psychedelic tradition. I thought I had saw something about that.
Yeah, the first, I'm not an expert, so take this with a grain of salt. It's my understanding that there's no overt discussion around the use of psychedelics in their culture,
Yeah.
and a big part of that is that those things are sacred and therefore not for white man or for mass consumption. And we've got plants like the acacia tree here, acacia courtier in particular, which is highly psychedelic. So the medicines are here naturally, but they don't discuss or talk about that. So it's a taboo to discuss it with the West.
I got you. Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's a different dynamic between the native Australians and the Native Americans, but um yeah, I mean I'm glad you overcame all those obstacles though to find psychedelics as a therapy, because listening to your story, and I know I know you summed it up. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of other crazy stuff that uh just a whole lifetime of it there. Um
Yeah,
and
homelessness, all that stuff.
well, yeah, or the mass grave thing. I was,
Yeah,
making me kind of be like, holy
yeah,
shit. But
yeah, yeah,
it's it's the kind of thing where we talk a lot uh in our community, other psychedelic communities and stuff like that, of how good, whether it's in a therapeutic setting like going to a retreat or just your own experiences, the therapy that psychedelics can clear trauma, let you let go, like you were talking about. And there's a whole range of things that people consider and can call trauma. And it's like listening to your story, anything that I've ever called trauma in my life is child's play compared to what you've gone through. And to hear that it's been powerful for me to clear what I consider trauma, but to see that it clears trauma to the level that you experience is, I mean, it's amazing. It's, one of those stories that, like you said, it takes you speaking up and podcasts like ours and stuff like that. It takes that to be like, listen to this fucking story, because the government, the media, they're not going to tell you this story. This doesn't do nothing for them,
That's
like
right,
this,
exactly.
The info in this story changes their narrative, so they don't want to tell that story, so it takes us. So I definitely am glad that you reached out to talk about this, because I mean, shit, dude, like the fact that it, like, there's no, I know you were taking medicine and going to therapy and all that, but it's like,
it didn't work.
Well, it's like that doesn't work for housewives that are bored, and so like it's not going to work for someone that went through what you went through,
Well, the medicine, I've got here's my take on medication. For me, the medication also stopped me from feeling positive emotions, and it took the extreme lows out of the negative emotions. Effectively, it guaranteed a better quality unhappiness. But I walked around with this deep sense of daily dread. And here's the vicious loop I found myself in. So I had anxiety, I had depression, I had PTSD, and I had addiction, and they were all the same thing. Because if I left the house at all, my anxiety would peak, setting my PTSD up ready to be triggered at the smallest of slights. And there's always something that happens when you go out. Someone's having a bad day, or the cashier at the shop is in a bad mood, whatever. I would explode at all of those things. I couldn't leave the house. But in staying in the house, it provoked my depression and made me feel suicidal. So I dealt with that through my addiction, which masked the pain. So when you talk about mental health and different types of illnesses, they all link into one spiral into hopelessness. And for me, it was all connected, and the medication didn't work. Talk therapy didn't work at all. And the difference with psychedelics, in talk therapy, they would say things to me that were actually quite profound, but it couldn't get through to me. Whereas ayahuasca, when I had ayahuasca, I knew what they were saying. It went straight to my heart. It bypassed all the barriers, and I had this knowing. And I realized love is the answer. Release the pain, open up, let go, surrender. But I couldn't do that with a chat. Talk therapy takes 20 years to make imperceptibly small incremental changes over extraordinarily long periods of time, if you're lucky. Not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I so well, I've talked about it in other episodes of the podcast, but you probably haven't heard. But like, my background is everybody in my family is a therapist. Like, my mom is a psychologist, my aunt and uncle are psychologists or psychiatrists. My brother is a psychologist. His ex-wife was a psychologist. My sister's a psychologist, and I didn't go to therapy until I was 37.
Right.
But I had been psychoanalyzed my entire life by all these other people. But anyway, I quit my government job of 5 years just because I mean, I was getting into psychedelics. They were definitely leading me down that path, but I just needed to step out of the machine for a little bit. And I was a stay-at-home dad for 2 years, and I had all these visions of like, I'm going to change everything about my life, and I'm going to be the best dad there's ever been, and blah, blah, blah. And like, about 2 months into being a stay-at-home dad, it kicked the shit out of me and sent me to therapy. And I went to talk therapy for 1 year, like one, calendar year session. And it helped. But the thing is, it helped me get to a point where I could start to work on myself. Like that. It's like I still needed to make the difference. I still needed to do to initiate everything. It's just that I had someone, an impartial third party, basically, that I could bounce ideas off of, and was rooting for me to grow. But nothing really, like I said, nothing really uber traumatic happened to me to put me in that place. Like,
Yeah.
So I think what I'm getting at is like the more severe the damage is that causes the trauma, because anything, I mean, even my petty bullshit can be considered trauma. It's just
Absolutely.
not to the level. It's the more severe the damage is that causes the trauma, the more severe the treatment needs to be. And it's like, yeah, talk therapy kind of helped me, but it's like in your situation, there's no way it would help you. It's like
Yeah.
you did need this. That's where psychedelics, I think, like, they can be good for holistic. You don't need to be super damaged to have them help you, but at some point they are the only thing that will get you out of that, almost. I mean, obviously, there's some people that are, even though they find themselves in the same kind of place as you were, for whatever reason, are able to get themselves out without psychedelics. I think for most people, it would take that kind of reality shattering almost,
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Well, what I found is, looking back at it now, I didn't realize it at the time. Actually, let's talk about trauma for a minute. Something that I sort of figured out, or I was shown by ayahuasca, is that the event that happens, or the events that happen in your life, don't actually have anything to do with trauma. The event is just an event that occurred in the past, and it's gone and doesn't have any existence any longer. The trauma is our reaction to that event, and how we've processed it, and how we hold the event in our body. So there are people who experience far worse things than I ever faced. There's kids in Africa digging for blood diamonds, for God's sake. So there are people who experience far worse things than me, and they have little or no trauma potentially. There are people who've gone through things that you'd say weren't as extreme as my situation, but their trauma is every bit as real and overpowering and overwhelming and debilitating as mine, because it's not the actual event that matters, it's our relationship to it. And what I came to understand is that the things that happened to me, I was clinging to those things as my self identity. I said, this is who I am. I am the sum of my experiences. These terrible things have happened, and now this is who I am as a person. This is Joel. And ayahuasca allowed me to let go of the past, to release my relationship with the past, and in doing so, release the trauma, to realize I am now, I am here, I live in the present moment, and I have all of my life to use intention to manifest the kind of existence that I want to have. So for me, psychedelics are a gateway to letting go of trauma. And I just wasn't able, I couldn't even get my head around the idea that that wasn't who I was. I completely self identified. And being shown that that's not who I was, that was just things I was holding on to, allowed me to let go of it. You know what I mean? And be free.
yeah, I mean, it's yeah, and you bring up a good point about trauma, that it's like everybody's funk is their funk, like
Yeah.
you can't really be like, well, I shouldn't be upset about this because look what this guy went through or whatever. And that's not the case. It's like, we all need to work through our own shit, no matter how severe that is. I do think I find it useful, um and I guess if you want to call it empathy or whatever, being able to be aware of other people's, what they're feeling and what they're dragging around.
Mm.
I think I do find that useful in being positive, in that, like, when there is bad situations happening to me, like, I kind of am able to, like, not dwell on it and be like, man, it could be worse. Remember my buddy that, like, his wife left him and took the kids, or whatever situation. It's like, it helps to be positive. But it can be almost like you were talking about a negative feedback loop, just to be like, I shouldn't be depressed about this because there's people that have it worse. And you can like keep beating yourself up over like not having the severity of, negative pressures on your life that other people do. And, that's one thing that psychedelics has taught me too. Like I've found a lot of depression in my life has been because, and not just depression, but like, self-loathing has been because of my empathy, that I've been
Yeah.
like, you're a piece of shit. You're fucking depressed and you got nothing to worry about compared to all these people, or whatever. And it's like this other thing that just beats you up and feeds on that depression. And that's one thing for me. Now I haven't had structured psychedelic therapy like you did, but just the message I've gotten from these plant healers, this plant medicine has been, you know don't be so fucking rough on yourself,
Man, yeah,
like the
absolutely.
you know
Judgment is debilitating.
yeah,
Self-judgment. The most dangerous word in the English language is should. It is the
yeah,
root of most problems.
yeah,
This should be this way. That person should do that. I should not have done that. Should is the word of judgment. And you're right. You can judge yourself for being too judgmental.
yeah,
You know what I mean? You can really mess with yourself. And just throwing back to what I was saying before, something doesn't have to be, your parents being kidnapped or you being caged like an animal, for it to have really profound impact on you. And sometimes the impact that you're feeling doesn't even make sense. Like mothers struggling with postnatal depression, and then feeling that guilt and that self judgment and all of that. It's Eckhart Tolle describes it as the pain body, which
yeah,
is the sum of all of the negative interactions, experiences, thoughts, memories, whatever it might be that have ever happened to you, all rolled up into one great big ball of perception. And the pain body craves more pain for others, pain for self, and we constantly hurt ourselves even when we're trying to be positive. And ayahuasca allowed me to release all of that. In fact, it was all in one session. The whole thing got released. Can I tell you about that?
yeah. I was gonna say, let's get into the details of the actual ayahuasca.
Yeah, man, awesome. All right, so this I'll tell you right now, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
So as long as you can be comfortable with that, I
Oh,
can't
let
talk
it out.
about
Oh, of
this.
course.
Oh,
Let
sweet.
it out, bro.
I don't mind. I can't talk about this without being overwhelmed. So in ceremony one, actually before ceremony one, we had a meeting with the shaman, a guy named Hamilton, and he said sometimes when you've got deep issues, we don't deal with it in the first ceremony. We prepare you for the second ceremony. And that was exactly what happened to me. I didn't realize at the time, but he was talking to me. So in the first ceremony, there's lots of purging, lots of releasing. And at the very end of the ceremony, I had a vision of this deformed, ugly beast, twisting in shape and dimension. It was horrific looking, and it was inside me. It wasn't a demon or an external entity. It was my pain body. It was all of it, all rolled up into a monster that completely dominated my entire life. It's who I thought I was. And ayahuasca showed it to me, and I saw it, and I said, "Get it out." And ayahuasca brought it all the way up to the bottom of my throat, ready to release it, and it stopped. And it said, "This is tomorrow. This is what you have ahead of you. This is the next step." So I was like, okay. So we come up to ceremony two, and I set an intention. And to give you an idea of where my head was at, my intention was rip the monster out, which is a terrible intention. Rip, it talks about sort of violent and aggressive, but that's how I felt. I felt hate and anger towards my pain, but hate and anger is a way of holding on to pain. So I had my intention was based on holding on to it. As I'm sitting there waiting for the ceremony to start, the shaman called out and he said, call the spirits to you with love. Call them to you with love. Ask them to come to you and to take all of your pain. and he was talking to me. And I realized in that moment, my intention is wrong here. My intention is going to hold on to it. So I started calling out, come to me with love, come to me with love, fill me with so much love that it pushes all of the darkness out. And that became my intention. Fill me with so much love that it pushes all of the darkness out. And through ceremony, I purged. I had this huge spirit that surrounded me from all directions. I was like sitting inside this spirit. And right in my ears, I'm hearing sounds of aggressive purging, like "Bruh, bruh," and then burping, and then farting and shitting noises, and it was all around my head. And the spirit was showing me, do this, let go, and I was just purging and purging and purging. And when I purged, I would say, thank you for this healing. Fill me with more love. Push all of the darkness out. I kept talking back to spirit. Take it all. I give it all. I release it. When I would purge into the bucket, I realized that I had to release it with love. In that moment, if you give anger or hate to this darkness, it's actually holding on to it. It's what it wants. And so I actually said to the pain, thank you for trying to help me. You tried to help me, and I thank you. And now I release you with love. I had closure. It was like when you find peace after a breakup, you've got full healing. I had closure, and I released it with love, and I sent it on its way just out into the universe to just have peace in itself. I want to pause for a minute and explain how my darkness tried to help me, because people might be going, what are you talking about? If you'd have told me before ayahuasca to release my pain with love, I would have been angry. In fact, I got angry at psychologists when they try to say this kind of thing. My anxiety and my PTSD were keeping me in a sense of hyper awareness, always ready and prepared in case I got attacked. It was trying to protect me. My depression was keeping me at home, from living my life, from connecting with people, and from experiencing joy or happiness. But it was protecting me from being in a vulnerable situation where I could be hurt. And addiction simply completely took the pain away, trying to keep me from hurting. So when I released all of this darkness, I did so understanding that even though they destroyed my life, even though it was darkness from within me, I had this opening up of just this release of, go. I send you away. Thank you. You serve me no longer. I release you. Your work is done. You're free. So I'm so grateful. I can't think about this without feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. Just the feeling of peace, just releasing it out, just that darkness coming out. This went on for the entire ceremony until we come to the moment. I'm going to get very emotional here. This was big. This was the culmination of the healing. This moment. I'm about to share the most profound moment of my existence, the single moment that I'm most grateful for, and I just feel humbled by what I'm about to share. I had a vision, and it wasn't a vision that I was being shown something to observe. It was a new truth. It was something that ayahuasca allowed me to see within myself. It was my new reality. I saw myself standing on a podium with a huge crowd around me, my children, my parents, my friends, I used to have at least, all standing around a huge crowd, a crowd of millions. And I'm on a podium and everyone was cheering. And I realized in that moment, I am the hero of my story. I'm not the villain. I'm not the one who brings destruction and pain. I'm the hero. I'm not better than somebody else. I'm not the hero for their story. In my story, I'm the hero. And ayahuasca showed me putting my arm around people and comforting them in grief. And ayahuasca showed me helping people as they go through their life. And ayahuasca showed my children looking up to me and seeing pride in their eyes. And in that moment, I was new. It cut to the very core of who I am, the deepest depth of my own self-perception. In that moment, who I was and how I perceived the entire universe transformed. I am the hero in my story. That's what healing feels like.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, and everybody needs to realize that, whether you take ayahuasca or not. It's like, that's a good, like, philosophy, is like, you know, be the hero. Because, like, you got to think that, like, people that definitely are not acting like the hero in their story, like, do they at least even think they're being the hero? Like, it's totally, yeah, I don't know. That's that is an amazing lesson. Like, that's a great thing. Like, honestly, I think tomorrow, like, I always kind of try to tell my kids when they go to school, like, something, profound to keep throughout the day or whatever. And, like, that's a good thing, man, to, like, tell your kids before they go to school, like, hey, be the hero today.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And for me, this was my journey. And if I think most of your listeners are probably well versed in psychedelics, but if someone hasn't had experience, it's really important to understand that my journey was 100% unique to myself. And people go through all kinds of different journeys. Ayahuasca gives you what you need, not what you want. So uh, my journey is my journey, but it gives you a what I really want to convey is when you surrender to healing, fully surrender and just give it all back to spirit, the changes aren't just goodbye to trauma. We are talking about a potential transformation in your entire operating system, the entire way that you view yourself. I love myself. I'm not in love with myself, but I'm a miracle. You're a miracle. Everyone listening to this, they're a miracle.
Hmm.
But I didn't see any of that. So when I talk about healing from ayahuasca and other psychedelics are apt, more able to do the same sort of thing. But I've got a romantic relationship with ayahuasca. But we're talking about more than just letting go of pain from an event. It can be far more profound than that. It was literally flipping the switch from villain to hero,
Hmm.
and to the deepest sense of who I am. Self judgment is crippling, and I don't carry any of that. I don't even carry shame. Some of the things that I talk about in my past are shameful things, but I don't feel shame.
Yeah.
I feel like it empowers me to now say, you can go from this to this. And I just hope that there's a couple of people listening who have no hope and they feel hopeless, who can go, wow, this might be my calling. This might be right for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, ayahuasca definitely seems to get that point across with a punch to the face, for sure. But I think that's an overriding, like, theme of any psychedelic healing, is that, like, you are no obligation, and then this is a Alan Watts quote, but you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago.
I
And
love that quote. That's
yeah,
awesome.
and like, that's so true, because everything's a negative feedback loop with depression and anxiety. It's like, at any point in time, you can change your narrative, you can change your character and your avatar that you're playing. You could do that for the good or bad, honestly. But when we're talking about negative states of mental health, you can change that at any time. It's the degree of, like, reality check that you need to be able to do that. But I truly think that, like, whether it's through a psychedelic experience, or through talk therapy, or through just age and maturity or whatever, like, we can overcome any anxiety and depression just by realizing, like, I am stuck on the narrative that used to be me. I think that because I was an asshole, I think I'm always an asshole, or whatever. And that's never the case. Like, every day you wake up is a blessing. It's a miracle, like you said. Every day that everybody wakes up is a miracle. And you have that point at every day to live whatever story you want to live, to be the hero,
Yeah, the word now for me is this. It's become a central tenet in my life, being present now, and it's the principle behind meditation. And I learned about the essence of now, and it gets a little bit esoteric, but exactly what you're saying. Most people live in the past and project the past into the future, and live in their mind, allowing their thoughts, their pain body, or their previous pain, and their fears to dictate their reality, and they're completely disconnected from the moment. They're in their head. They're having thoughts. I'll give you an example. I used to I still smoke cigarettes, by the way. It's something that I'm working on releasing now. But I started off just smoking cigarettes, and then it became cigarettes in my mobile phone, and then you always wanted more. You wanted more. I had distractions from distractions, and just I take time all throughout the day to notice that I'm not present, and just sit and look at the trees, look at the people walking by, watch my dog, watch my kids, and really connect with that present moment, because now is all you actually have. And as you were saying, in that moment of now, you can embody any element of your potential personality that you choose to.
Yeah. Well, and a big thing for me, and I'm glad that, like, one of the terms you got out of what made you so emotional talking about your ayahuasca experience was gratitude, and how grateful you
Yeah.
were for everything, the bad and the good. And that goes into the now. You have to be grateful for now, because you can go back, if you wanted to analyze every fucking moment that's happened in your life at any time that could have been interrupted by a truck that steered off the road, or a comet that hit the earth, or whatever, anything
Yeah,
in
yeah,
between, and there
yeah.
wouldn't be now.
That's
And
right.
there's no guarantee that there's a future. The past is a miracle that it happened, but it's a chain of nows. And now is the only thing that you can be sure of, and you have to be grateful for it. And that is kind of the mantra I have, like you said, for meditation, because that's the key. And I see so much that is wrong, or, well, I mean, it is wrong, but I see so much of, like, the pain in the world is caused by just an overriding culture of not now. you know
Yes, exactly.
our culture now is social media, which is totally involved in bringing up the past, or arguing about what the future is going to be.
Or
And
even understanding the past. Stop trying to understand the past. Just let it go.
right, or to put blame on the past,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is the reason this happened. It's like, well, maybe, but it doesn't matter, it already happened, we're dealing with now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And to go into, like, to take those frames of reference or whatever, personally, that's what depression and anxiety is. Depression is dwelling on the past, anxiety is worrying about the future. And the cure for both of those is focusing your consciousness on the now, being grateful that now exists, and focusing on that. And like you said, looking at trees and whatever, just sitting down and being present. I'm very lucky that probably the biggest cure for anxiety and depression for me has been, I work outside, and I leave my goddamn phone in the car and go sit in the woods. Every day
Yeah.
I'm able to just
Beautiful.
sit there and look at the plants and trees and watch the seasons change, and whatever. And that's what I'm doing. Is it's forcing me to be in the now. And as great as phones and internet and all of these things are, I think they are just taking us even further away from the now.
Absolutely. In relationships, I think technology is. I think that the future generations are going to have a massive problem with home stability, simply from mobile phones. This common habit of sitting around your phones on the desk, and you're scrolling through stuff while you chat. You're not connected with the human being that you're sharing space with. You're not coming together with them and forming those bonds and all those kinds of things. So um, the now is all you've got, and people squander that now with a mobile phone app.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like it's, you know, I don't know how, I think you said you have kids, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever have this experience when you take them to like a sport, when they go to play a sport or whatever kind of thing, and then the parents are sitting around. It's a very rare situation to like strike up a conversation with one of the other parents. A lot of times it's like if you mention anything, they're like, leave me alone. I'm on my phone, bro.
Yeah, yeah, that's right,
And it
exactly. Well, this is actually interesting from my experience. So before ayahuasca, if I left the house, it would be there's a guarantee of a major incident, and it happened every single time. After ayahuasca, when I go out, I just have really lovely conversations with people everywhere, just passing them in the street or at the shops or whatever, and they're genuine and they're friendly, and I feel blessed by it, and it's because I'm just reaching out with love, and people, the right people, are responding because they're feeling that vibration. And I had this realization during my ayahuasca time that for me to live in paradise, my version of paradise, all I need to do is have loving connections with the people and community in my life. That's all I have to do. And for us to change the world, all we have to do is have everybody with loving relationships. Love is the answer. And so I've built a community around myself where I go to the shops and they're giving me milk over the counter, and I have a nice interaction. I choose to engage with them in a way that puts a smile on their face. And I find going outside energizing now, and a beautiful experience. So it's affected everything in my life.
Yeah. No, I mean, community engagement is, well, I mean, it's the number one reason we've got our podcast and Discord channel and stuff like that, is like, we can't, so, we attract people that want to talk about certain things. And in their community, they can't talk about it. So we've created a space to talk about that. But, on a smaller level, not psychedelic based, that's been a big part in my personal growth too. It has been that community engagement, to where when it's nice enough outside to walk, and my family and I want to go out to dinner at some place in our community, we walk there, and we leave our phones at home and we walk there, and it might be a couple miles or whatever, and we try to entertain the kids so that they're not complaining half the way or whatever. But we run into other people, to some of the restaurants. We walk past like a fishing lake and stuff like that, and we'll talk to people that are fishing, or see people walking their dogs and pet their dogs and talk to them about their dogs and our dogs and whatever,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's a completely different experience than if you just Google what restaurant has good reviews and get the directions, and then you all drive there, and the kids have their iPads in the back, and it's just all this, like, you're just taken out of the moment. So like, community, being part of your community, if you have a community that's into having people be a part of it, because I mean, there's some communities that are built up to just have people stay in their lane, but for the most part, like, we're like able to feel like a part of the community, and that helps us live in the now, like, as a family almost.
Yeah, it's really grounding. I've never been to New York. I know that the New York kind of, I watch TV with like Seinfeld and all that kind of stuff, and they've got this sort of vibe where it's everyone's sort of protecting themselves in case they're almost going to be attacked, and everyone's sort of got their wits on high alert. And so I don't know what other cultural experiences are like, but I've found here in Australia that most people are open to having their moment improved if you're coming from a genuine place of caring and love. I'm not saying we can go around hugging the guys in the shops all the time and that kind of thing. There's some boundaries. I appreciate that, but being able to go out on the street and see other human beings and feel positivity for and from them. And just like you're talking about, when I go to the dog park with my dog, I used to just sit there on my phone and ignore all of the other people. Now I go to the dog park and I just have chat. I'm not pouring my heart and soul out to them. It's just a pleasant interaction, and I'm using intention to cultivate that. And it's really added a sense of belonging and a sense of this is my place and I'm feeling grounded. Remember before when I was talking about my time in Asia and all that stuff, I didn't belong anywhere. Well, now I feel I belong here. I'm connected. I go into the shops and they recognize me and they always have a joke or I have a joke with them. And it's a small thing that has a big impact on my life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's something just in our DNA to be social and uh, you know, communicative. like
You got
we
that.
yeah, like we want to talk to each other, and we want to help each other. There's so much of like human culture that is about tearing each other down and everything, but it's like that can all be traced back to like these like organized thought out systems, to where like our natural like instinct is to build community. And it sucks because like, and I've had this argument with my son's 10, and he knows everything in the world compared according to him.
Yes.
And he like, we wanted to limit the amount of time he's on TikTok, which I don't know if that's popular in Australia, but it's
My 11-year-old loves TikTok.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, all right, I figured it was, but and so in order to increase the time that we allowed him to be on TikTok on his phone, he had to like give us a presentation onto why it was important. And
Nice.
and 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 his thing was that like, well, he calls us boomers, which I mean, like,
Okay, boomer.
I know, yeah, he says that to me all the time, and I'm like, my parents are boomers. I'm not a boomer, but he basically said that boomers um don't well, like, they grew up, they don't know what it's like to be a kid without social media, and that now you can't be a kid without like basically unlimited social media. Like, there's no,
Can you
you're just,
imagine that?
you're out
Wow.
of the loop if you're not that. And I was like, dude, this is like, there's going to be a lot of instances where you're right about technology, but I'm like, I am right because this is a universal thing that you need to have real life friends. I was like, if you want to go to these kids' houses and make stupid videos and dance and do the same shit you're doing on TikTok, that's
Yeah,
fine,
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's
yeah,
real life. But I was
yeah.
like, if your idea of being social is just all of you are sitting in your house making dumb videos, you are wrong. And you will find that out at some point in your life, that like, shit, I need real life, real friends, real discussions, real community. And so like, even though, yes, he's kind of right that kids nowadays will never understand what it's like to not have social media, to not have a phone. There was always going to be a need for real life, real, like in
Yeah,
front of
absolutely. Tangible.
tangible,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so, and to bring that back to psychedelics, I think that's what ayahuasca, being this ceremony that's in the jungle with a native guy that has no technology, and they're this technology, the only technology involved with ayahuasca is domesticated fire. Right,
Mm,
that like,
yeah,
it brings you back to that. And there's something with, you can get so far off and so damaged from whatever trauma there is. You can be so depressed, so anxious, that the only way back, to start again, to become the hero, to say, no, I'm not going to be the villain, is to go back to your roots and to go
yeah.
back to the jungle,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I've got had a bizarre interaction which really demonstrates there's a social slide where it's picking up momentum. This current social trend. I called a 21-year-old girl that I know to arrange a dinner event or something, and she asked me why I didn't just text her. We had to work out some details, so it wasn't just like here's the information. We had to have a discussion. And she felt like it was an invasion of her privacy that I spoke on the phone instead of texted. So even a phone conversation now is personal space, and she couldn't handle that. She's wanted to do it in text, so she felt, but it's isolating. And the kids now are watching, not just playing video games, they love watching videos of people playing video games. So there's this degradation. It's not just I want to play video games now. It's I don't even want to play the game. I just want to watch somebody else play the game, and it's even more mind numbing. And it's it all of this takes us further and further from our roots, like you were just saying, and it's all more and more isolating. And as people choose to use social media like Facebook and Instagram in order to share their life experience, it's artificial. It's designed to only talk about the good things, the positive stuff, dopamine hits from funny memes, and there's actually no substance. And it's hollow. It's a process of hollowing out the soul as you become more and more disconnected. And I've got grave concerns for the sort of society that we're going to live in, where people become more and more narcissistic, more and more isolated. And I believe as a result, we're going to have more and more mental illness, which is why your show is just so fucking important.
Yeah, and I think so. I struggle with this again. I'm going to equate how I talk to my children to how I feel about society, in that um there you're not the psychedelic community is not going to get the message across to people by just constantly yelling about it. The psychedelic community is going to get the message across by being the change you want to see in the world. And the more that the psychedelic community can grow and improve and better themselves and be happier, better adjusted people, and the more that the fucking shit system of bullshit is going to just crush people, the more people like you that are going to be, whether they're in the psychedelic community or not, and they're like, I got to try this ayahuasca stuff, or whatever happens, if they find mushrooms and they do microdosing, if they do whatever little trendy thing that they find it, that they haven't been part of drug culture before that or whatever, they're going to find that, and they're going to improve their life. They're going to grow, and there's a network effect that's going to happen. And eventually, like, the system of, like, whatever message it is that psychedelic plants are getting across to people is going to look so much better than where everything else is headed. And yeah, like you said, that takes everyone telling their story, but it also takes just being better people, building each
Being
other
a
up. And
change.
that's what's important. Like our Discord server in our community that, goes along with our podcast is, I mean, if you look at most of the chats on there, it's the most positive, uplifting social media that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
No, like we might joke a little bit on there, but for the most part, it's like nobody is posting anything negative. It is
Yeah.
all people talking about what's going good on in their life, what they're doing to grow, and sharing stories of links or music, art, whatever. It's all positivity. And it's like we have that opportunity with all social media. But if you look across, the average social media averages out to just more negative bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
I, I don't know if you remember, there was some like Twitter account that was a bot that was like supposed to take all of Twitter and average it out into like language that was like what the average discussion is on Twitter, and it became
That's
like racist and sexist. I mean, it was just this like
oh
terrible
wow.
bot that they had to
That
like
is
turn off.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I would love to. I would love to read more about that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just turn into this deformed version of the representing the whole of the masses. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
Something that I've really appreciated and enjoyed is the open communication with people from the psychedelic community when they've struggled. What I've found with people who come from the psychedelic community is that when they're going through something and they've needed some just to share it and just get another perspective, they've done so quite openly, and it's allowed people to come back to them from a place of love and support and share perspectives and thoughts and options, like a community coming around them in that moment of need. And I've seen that done over small issues, and I've seen it done over some quite big and profound issues as well. And in both times, the community has come around them with love. Not everyone, but just a few key people have stepped forward and helped and shouldered the load and provided some advice and guidance from a genuine place of love and empathy. And you don't get that in your regular disconnected community, and you certainly don't get that on your Facebook or your Instagram or any of those kinds of things. So I think that as dark as my views are of the future with social media, I don't see any possibility for anything other than psychedelics continuing to grow. And the main limiting factor is really government perspective. That's really the next challenge, is getting governments to get on board with understanding how transformational this stuff is, and that we have a better world by having it.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, uh, that's going to come with money.
Yeah.
That once they see how much money, like, these ayahuasca retreats are making, and they're like, well, we're missing out on that, and they're all flying to other countries to get that. We could have those tax dollars. That's how it's going to become therapy. And then, we've already seen in the States with companies putting patents on synthesized psilocybin and stuff like that. Like, it'll come down to money and whatever. And it's like, in an ideal system, it would be free. But I kind of compromise with that, and that, like, healing's healing, even if someone, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, but like, I'm sure it cost quite a bit of money to go
Oh
to
yeah.
this, and so, like, okay, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. The money's fucking bullshit anyway. Like, I'm not into like, you can't put a value on healing. And so if the system has to see dollar signs in order to change, okay, whatever, fuck it. You guys can have the fucking money. We want the healing.
Yeah. Well, I was homeless for multiple periods of time. Was in this spiral where I would, something would happen, it would trigger me. I would go and inject some meth, and then I would end up, a few weeks later, I'd be homeless again. And this cycle kept repeating over and over. I'd clean up, and then something would trigger me. I'd go and get meth. I'd inject. I mean, when I say I'd inject into my neck and all kinds of stuff. I was gone.
Yeah.
Hanging out with criminals. Got kidnapped once by a criminal mob. Well, kind of kidnapped. It's a long story. Anyway, so I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Just about the cost of it.
The cost, yeah. So I got an army payout when I finally decided to try and see if I can get some compensation and stop living on the streets. So I was very, very lucky that I got this payout from what happened to me when I was in service, and that allowed me to cover the costs. But it cost me in Australian dollars something like $8,000 all up, 4,000 Australian dollars just in flights alone to fly halfway around the world, another 3,000 Australian. So 60 cents in the dollar for Aussie US conversion. So it costs a lot of money. I
Yeah.
was very, very lucky to be able to afford that, even though I was in that really dark place. Um, but it was definitely the right thing for me to do. I've had a few people say to me in chats and things that they can't afford to have that kind of expense for healing. But I find it interesting. I look around, I'm stuck in traffic all the time. I'm gridlocked on the freeway, and I'm looking around and I'm saying every one of these people found $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for a car.
Mhm.
So it's more achievable, I think, than most people realize. But there are other options apart from going to the Amazon. I do believe, though, that um, I really needed the guidance personally of a master shaman for my experience. I sat and drank previously a couple of years earlier with an inexperienced facilitator, and it just didn't didn't work. So I'm a really big believer in the power of what the shaman does and their contribution. Not everyone needs that kind of space, but when you're as in darker places I certainly needed somebody to give me that hands-on guidance and get me through it. So it was worth every penny for me.
Yeah.
When you had the second ceremony,
Yeah.
was there any ceremony past that point, or
Oh
was
yeah.
that there was? So
Oh yeah.
what did you gain from those after the second ceremony when you got the total healing? Was it something that affected you at all, or was it something that just like reaffirmed what occurred on that second ceremony?
No, there's 5 ceremonies in total, and every ceremony built on the last one. So in my third ceremony, I didn't I struggled with an intention. So I said, I was talking to the shaman. I said, "What do I do? I got everything I came for. I don't know what else to ask for. What do I do here?" And so we had a bit of a chat, and I came up with an intention, which was to give me everything that I need so that when I return to Australia, I'll live the rest of my life in joy, love, peace, cultivating beautiful, connected relationships to all of the people in my life until the end of my days. And what the ceremony turned into being was a spiritual awakening. I realized that everything is spirit, that I am spirit. I fell in love with spirit. I gave myself to spirit. I said, I want to walk, with a spiritual life in a spiritual kind of way. I received more healing. I had this really strange. It was at the beginning of the ceremony, and there was a spirit that was sitting just above my head, just floating in the air. It was red in shape, morphing, geometrical morphing shape, and it shone this red ray down onto me and under my head, and my it felt like my mind was vibrating, and it stayed there for a few minutes, and then it sort of worked its way down my whole body, just shining this ray, and wherever it touched, it would just vibrate, not shake, but like a vibration. And as I sat there, I just gave thanks, and I remember thinking, this is what healing feels like. It wasn't this sort of profound vision moment, but whatever it was doing, it was giving me a different kind of healing that that's obviously, I don't know what it did, but it felt amazing. It then left, and then a purple spirit came over to my right, again floating in the air. It shone rays down on me. Same kind of experience. It left, and there was lots of white ones, all sort of circling around me. A lot of them flew into me, and I sort of opened up. I said, "Just come live with me. I want to share my experience with you. I want to live a life that is connected to what is the real meaning of life, the meaning of everything, purpose, happiness. The answer to all of it is love, and I want to embody that in my life personally." So that was ceremony 3. I had this moment where I sort of broke with ceremony tradition, but it was the end of ceremony 3, and the shaman sort of called out, "How's everybody doing? Is everyone okay?" And there was silence, and I couldn't hold it in. I sort of gave this speech. You're supposed to be quiet. I gave this speech, and I said, "I just have to say to all of you, I love you all so much. I feel so connected to you. I'm honored that you're here and you're on this journey with me. You're a blessing. You're a miracle. Thank you for being here. I love you all." This is how I felt, and I've been feeling versions of that ever since. The next ceremony taught me that I'm a creator, and about the power of intention. And it showed me that I get to, in any moment that exists, create whatever my response to that is going to be. I can create beautiful and delicate connected moments with people. I can create responses to difficult challenges. I can create happiness, joy, and beauty. I'm a creator. And everything is spirit, and you create your intention with spirit. And that was a whole ceremony just on that. And lastly, ceremony 5, um, I realized I already knew it, but I actually um, felt myself as a spirit. So I realized that in ceremony 5, I have a body. I'm not my body. I am spirit in my body. At one point, I actually came out of my body at the top of my head, And it wasn't like a vision. It was a removal of my spirit from my being, and I just floated above my body, and just felt this immense peace, this tremendous release of being free from being contained inside the meat sack. I just floated there, just feeling just connected to the universe and love and life, and realized this is who I am. I'm not my past. I'm not my ego. I'm not my thoughts, my memories, or my fears. I am spirit. And I felt myself come back into my body and feel connected to my body, but knowing that I'm not my body. And then it hit me. I'm a miracle. And that was my I'm a miracle moment. And I sat up and just lifted my hands to the air and said, thank you. I'm a miracle. Not because I'm any more a miracle than anybody else, but I, in my own right, I am made of the matter of the universe. I live on a ball floating in infinite space, and I'm a spirit, and I get to live in the physical realm. I get to experience 3 dimensions. I get to eat cheeseburgers. No spirit ever ate a cheeseburger. I get to do all of that. I get to do it and live it here and now, and I'm a miracle. And I just felt these waves of gratitude and love, and I just knew that everything is and always will be and always has been perfect. And the only reason we don't realize it is because we're disconnected from the actual reality, the reality of spirit, the reality of the universe, and that is love. All you have to do is connect to love. You connect to love, you are in paradise.
So I can only imagine how like buzzing you were at that moment.
Yeah, still am.
How was it coming back to home, I
Yeah.
guess, and dealing with the community that you left in that bad setting, I guess you could say, and then coming back such a changed man in a short period of time?
Yeah,
Man,
like
that is an awesome question.
yeah, like
Yeah.
and also like what did your therapist think about that when you came home, or your doctor?
I'll do the therapist one first, because that's an easy answer. But the other part of everybody else, that's a really interesting one. The therapists have sort of said, well, there's nothing for us to talk about. If you feel like you're struggling, you know where we are. Reach out, but there's no more sessions needed. My the GP said, yeah, we're not going to put you back on meds after you've been gone. We don't medicate for the sake of it, but come back and see me every couple of weeks just to make sure that you're still okay, because I'm worried about you. But I'm really happy that you're happy, and yeah, still, that's all fine. So the medical people, um, they professionally care, but they don't have a personal vested interest. So if you're not displaying symptoms, then they're just like, okay, well, that's weird. What a coincidence. Still can't talk about ayahuasca. Well, you got lucky, right? So no real thing there. But people that I knew, this is really this was a big deal. Um, People were weird, particularly the girl that I had a relationship with. Was really weird because I had all these visions and teachings about how to love her, how to nourish her. I saw her as a vine that had withered, and I could tend her garden, tend her vine, and have her flourish and blossom, which, by the way, has happened. But when I got back, it wasn't the case. And we had this one moment in particular where she absolutely unleashed. It was like a purge. It was just this torrent of pain directed at me. You broke me just because you went away and you got better. I'm not better. You say you're better, but nothing changed for me. You hurt me. You betrayed me. You broke me. You ruined my life because of what you did. You did this to me. And weeping, just sobbing, like her whole body was shaking, just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And prior to ayahuasca, I wouldn't have gotten more than a sentence into that conversation before I was on the streets, and shooting up. And instead, what I felt was, without even having to try, I just felt this deep well of empathy for her and acceptance. I accepted what she was saying. I just held her and I said, "You're right. You're right, and I love you. and I'm here for you for as long as you need. You're right. You've gone through so much. It was so hard for you. You shouldn't have had to have dealt with that. I put this all on you. And I actually had to accept that to her, who I was still who I was in that moment, and who I would be in the future. And her past was her future, and she still saw me as that person. And I just held her, and she wept and she wept and she wept, and I just had acceptance and gratitude for that acceptance, and gratitude for the genuine empathy that I felt. It didn't hurt me that she felt this way. I felt for her pain, and I was able to bring love to her pain and heal her pain, for her to release that pain. And it took about 2 days of doing this. Went on for a couple of days, and until she was just able to release it. And we've just had the most amazing, amazing connection. While I was away in Peru, I felt so deeply in love with her in a way I'd never had before, and so grateful that her spirit would share space with me. And that's just grown with time. I'm really grateful. She's an amazing woman. I didn't earn her releasing that. She chose to release that. So that's her win, not mine. But my reaction to it was really, I was really grateful for it. Other people in my life have been happy for me because they saw the train wreck, and they don't believe my experience. Because it's too out there. They're conservative Christians, for example, what have you, and it's too outside the box. And the line that I use with all of them is, I don't need you to believe it. I just need you to believe that I believe it, and it has transformed my life. A couple of people have said, but is it going to last? Is it just you're still buzzing from being high in the jungle, and you're going to revert back? And that's a really important point, because a lot of people have an experience, and then they return to their lives and they don't integrate, and they slide back into their old life, and it wasn't a transformation. It turns out it was just an experience. So I have things that I do every single week or every single day to keep myself moving in this direction. So I'm studying the basics of shamanism. I'm not a shaman or anything like that, but just the basics of it. I hold ceremony for myself without plant medicine, because I don't have access to it here in Australia. I make sure that I have a lot of gratitude and focus on all of those things. I make sure that I get out of the house and change my routines. So I've integrated it, and a big part of my ongoing integration is the YouTube channel that I've got. Turn Cell, by the way, I'll give it the plug. Turn Cell. It's not monetized. It's just my way of saying thank you to Spirit and sharing the healing that I experienced. But I'm doing Turnstile because it also helps to, apart from giving thanks, it helps me to remind myself of the journey that I'm on, and keep me connected to it, and keep it integrated in my daily life, so it doesn't become just a crazy week in the jungle.
Yeah, I mean it's important. Even an earth shattering experience like you had.
Mm,
It's so easy to backslide.
yeah,
And I mean, I hate using the term woke, but it's like
yeah,
as you awaken,
yeah,
it's so easy to fall back asleep. It's just like any other day. You can hit snooze button at any time,
yeah,
like, and I find myself doing that. And oftentimes, yes, maybe the answer is, okay, it's time to have another experience,
yeah,
but I don't think that's necessary. I mean, I'm sure you will continue to be um part of the psychedelic community as you tell your story, and maybe have other experiences, but if you manage it correctly, your ayahuasca experience in Peru could be the only psychedelic experience you have going forward, and it would be good enough. You know,
absolutely, yeah,
and I think that's a big thing I've come to realize is I've been trying to. I haven't had any psychedelic experience since last summer, and uh, I've been trying to kind of figure out when I'm going to do it again or whatever, and I'm like, well, what am I? Am I at a point where I need that, I have to be aware of like, why do I have that calling to do that? Because, like, I'm working on my own growth and sustaining that growth. And, I, you know, like, you don't always need the psychedelic. You need the reality shift sometimes. People need that to really get all of the lessons that you've been talking about. But the integration, that's the term that everyone uses for it. That's an ongoing process, and integrating that into, and you did a good job explaining there. It's not just that you need to realize that you've shifted from villain to hero. You need everyone else in your life to realize that you've done that too. And how do you get them to realize that when they didn't go through what you just went through?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, interesting you brought up not necessarily needing more experiences. Within myself, I can honestly say I don't need any psychedelic experience right now for healing at all, or for trauma, or for happiness. For me, if I was to go back and have another experience at this point, it would be because it was part of a spiritual journey of trying to deeper connect to spirit. But in terms of happiness and joy, I got it. Now I have to live the life according to the lessons, because the healing was a moment in time, and that passes. And I can re-traumatize myself and hold on to that trauma and create all the same problems all over again. I'm a creator. I can create happiness. I can create pain. I had a really fascinating experience though when I returned from the Amazon. I joined a group and we smoked Sapo Toad, which is 5-MeO DMT.
Mhm.
And I wanted to go deep in me God. That was my thoughts. So I had it twice, and I had big. I mean, I took the biggest hit I can, huge hits. And I've had DMT before, and I always got the light show and sort of the geometry and all that kind of stuff. Saw an elf one time. So 5-MeO DMT being even stronger, I thought, here we go. I'm going to blast off and really go. And this is only about a week after I returned from ayahuasca, and I had the first hit, and I got nothing. It wasn't that my memory faded; it was just black. I had nothing but black. Normally with DMT and the like, I'd remember some of the shapes as it started, and sort of remembered that something happened, but I don't remember what it was. Perhaps it was blackness. I sat there for 20 minutes in black, and I wasn't scared or anything. It was just nothing's happening. I can't see the world, and there's nothing going on, and no, it wasn't that I forgot. It's just nothing happened. It's just
Mhm.
blackness. And then I smoked the second time. The exact same thing happened again. Meanwhile, other people are astral projecting into other dimensions and things, and I just had absolutely nothing. And at the very end of the second time, I had a knowing. It wasn't an audible voice; it was a knowing, and the knowing was this: I do not need to look outside myself for purpose and meaning any longer. I have all of the answers within me, and the answer is love. And I don't need to chase purpose outside myself. And when I went and smoked it, it was probably I wanted the light show and I wanted a spiritual experience, but I didn't need that. I already had that. And it was the best message for me at that time to realize you're right. I don't need to chase endless experiences. What's just happened to me is incredibly profound, and I need to integrate and ground and realize that the answer is love, and the answer is just live it now. I don't need more. Just be happy and love. That was great.
That's, I mean, that's fantastic, man. That has been like a big, it's not like I try to analyze other psychedelic podcasts and whatever. I don't really listen to that much other, but one message I really try to get across in our podcast and with my personal YouTube videos and stuff like that is that idea of like psychedelics are just a tool. They're not the answer. The answer's within, you know,
Yes.
and they're a tool that can shine a light on that answer, but that answer's within, because it goes back to like, you know, uh, much like how someone could live and die their entire life without a psychedelic experience. And to me, like, I'm like, you never got it. You never got it, because it took it took that psychedelic experience for me to get it. But there's other people that didn't have to have that, and they just didn't need that tool. And that's kind of what, I try to get across, that like, we can talk about these psychedelics, and this is what we're talking about, and I'm drawing the same type of people that did need that tool into the discussion. But okay, once we're all here, now the discussion is about the answer, and that answer exists in all different areas. It's just where the tribe that needed the psychedelic. And I mean, I've been starting to, we've had people on and talked about religion, and talked about diet, and talked about yoga and meditation, and all of these things, or all of these schools that get to that answer of living in the now and being grateful.
Absolutely. There's this it's more than a cultural thing, because we do it across cultures. Human beings have a tendency to want to venerate and worship the thing. So, for example, they fall over themselves to worship Jesus, who in my mind was a great mystic and master shaman. So my point with something like Jesus is, stop worshiping Jesus. Start paying attention to his message of love. And it's the same with ayahuasca. I don't worship ayahuasca. I'm eternally grateful for what it did for me. But it's the message from ayahuasca. That's the point. The point isn't ayahuasca. The point is what ayahuasca teaches. And I think it's great to have the gratitude for the spirit and to appreciate it. But ayahuasca doesn't want you to worship it. Jesus doesn't want you to worship him. It's the message. Don't worship Buddha. What did Buddha say? What's the message? And don't revere the thing. Don't make an idol out of the thing. It's you just take the message, live the message, and embody the message. It goes back to what you're saying way back. Be that change. Live that good life that shows just what psychedelic journeys of healing, what they can really do for you, and how you can bless others with them.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I mean, we're at an hour and a half. That's usually kind of where we wrap things up. I definitely want to thank you for coming on and telling your story, and I thought the discussion was really good too. And I mean, you're an example of like you said, you have to tell your story. Like, it matters to you, but in order for this to be, if one person hears this and is like, fuck it, I have to go go down and get an ayahuasca ceremony, and that's how I'm gonna fix it. And if it promotes the healing of one other person, just think of the network effect. And you cross however many podcasts you end up being on, and your YouTube channel, and as many times as you tell your story, just think of that network effect and how much healing that will promote. And I thank you, because that's what you've done with this episode. And
thank you very much for having me, man. I appreciate it. Hey, can I give my thing a quick plug? Is that okay?
Absolutely. And we'll put a link and everything. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. It's a brand new YouTube channel. It's called Turn Sail, one word. So it's about changing direction in life and sailing out of the storm. It's not monetized. There's no ads. There's no program for it. I'm not after fame. It's not about me being special. I'm just trying to spread the word. And my lane that I'm trying to help is people who haven't started the journey and they're thinking about it, or they've decided to do it, and they're sort of need some information. So I appreciate support from anybody, just with a like and a share. A like and a subscribe, rather, only because it helps me to connect to more people. But even more importantly, if you hear something on the channel and there's somebody that you think it might help, please send it to them. I'm just trying to give back to spirit and help people on their journey.
Absolutely, man. And
awesome.
So thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Love you.
As always, thank you for listening to the Help Find the Others podcast. Please don't forget to check out our Discord server to connect with our growing community. The link to join can be found in the description. And if you feel like donating to our channel to help us grow, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description, as well as some cryptocurrency wallet addresses. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or have any questions about these topics, please email helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. If you would like to leave a voicemail or a text message question for a future episode, Stan, what's that number again?
567-233-1335.
Okay, guys, thanks again. And until next time, let's help find the others.